What I'd like to do today is share with you, it doesn't look the same on my screen as on yours, okay, is share with you some of the findings from work I've done over the years on agricultural markets and the issue of price information. This is not SIGA work, but I thought it kind of work that would interest this crowd. So this is basically 4 papers I'm going to be building a story from. The work on this work that I'm documenting here started with a study of coffee farmers I did with Ruth Hill in Uganda. This was a study of growers of Robusta coffee, small growers, and that led us to do an RCT, a randomized control trial of price information with Indian farmers in Maharashtra. There was an opportunity to do the work there, so and I already had done some survey work in India on the small commercial farmers. And then I also will talk at the end about a study of producer prices in Niger, which complements the results from Maharashtra. So the first study about Uganda is about trying to understand why some farmers sell at the farm gate. So basically, just outside their farm, instead of taking their Robusta coffee to a nearby market, which typically means getting on a local bus with a few buckets of Robusta coffee beans to go and sell them there. Right, so when I'm talking about selling on the farm gate, basically in this Uganda, in this region of Uganda we're talking about, there would be a fellow showing up on a bicycle or maybe a moped, and they're trying to buy your Robusta coffee. How would we know that you have Robusta coffee? Well, in this part of the world, you have to, you harvest the cherries, the coffee cherries, and you have to dry them for about 10 days. So you can see the coffee drying, right next to the farm, so they kind of can judge whether it's ready or not, and they basically come and knock on your door. So that's the kind of the setup that you have there. It's very, very convenient. You don't have to do anything. They just come and knock on your door. So the thing is, of course, is that if you sell at the farm gate, typically you get a lower price than what you would get by selling at the market. And in fact, the price is significantly lower. So why would farmers do that? Well, we observe that they tend to do that, but the quantity they sell is small, and the market is far away, so kind of logical thing to do. And so that reminds us that maybe it's like convenience stores, people go to a convenience store because it's right next to their house, but they pay more, right? But they have to travel less far. So we thought maybe it's basically people paying for convenience. Now when you think about it, you say, well, why would poor people be the most willing to pay for convenience? So we kind of pursued this idea a little further, and we found that other things being equal, wealthier farmers would actually be the ones most willing to pay for convenience. So they'd be much more likely to sell at the farm gate than poor farmers if the quantity they are selling is equally small. The point, of course, is that a lot of wealthy farmers have more land and more output, and therefore they end up going to the market more often. So basically, the conclusion from that was that the small farmers, poor farmers with small quantities to sell, were not going to the market because they couldn't afford the transportation costs. It's basically a transaction cost story. And having observed that, we thought, well, what about a price transmission to farmers? Because coffee, Robusta coffee coming out of Uganda is exported internationally, nearly all of it. In fact, even though Uganda is the birthplace of Robusta coffee, as I understand it, the Ugandans themselves don't actually consume it much. So all gets exported. The price of coffee in international markets is easily observable. You have a commodity market, I think it's in London for Robusta, and you just get the price of the internet. So we basically try to see whether these London prices, which are determined, actually Uganda at that time, probably even more so now, was not really a leading world producer of Robusta coffee. Vietnam was, producing probably at least 5 times more than Uganda, exporting 5 times more. So, Uganda as a country is a bit of a price taker in this period. So basically, the price is determined by what happens in Vietnam, how much the Vietnamese government puts, how much Robusta they store and how much they put on the market, and that's what determines the price. So we kind of worry about wonder how this price works its way back into Uganda. You have about 20 to 25 exporters. Then, of course, a whole chain of wholesalers and millers. And then you have these little guys on a moped. So if you start tracking down the price, and the year that we look at coffee prices, they do fluctuate. They did fluctuate quite a bit. In fact, coffee prices do fluctuate all the time. So it's not an unusual year, but fortunately for us, we had a lot of price fluctuation within the year that we observed. And what we found is that the prices paid by the Ugandan exporters basically tracks the international price. The prices paid at the wholesale level, so by large aggregators, traders who aggregate quantities of coffee to ship them to Kampala, to the exporters. These also track, because they're lower, but they track reasonably well the export prices. But then the prices paid to the farmers, or the prices that the farmers report to us, they didn't actually track those prices. So they don't rise proportionally. So I have 2 graphs for that. This is a graph that shows you, so which one is the pointer that works? This one? Yes. So this graph has got three prices over a period of 18 years or something like that. This is the international Robusta price, or the price in London. And then we have 2 other prices, which are in Uganda. Kiboko is for a coffee that has been taken off its, Kiboko is a price of the coffee that's still in the cherries. FAQ price is a price of a coffee that has been milled and cleaned and is ready for export. So you can see that okay, they track each other, but if you look at the gap between this and this one goes up, but it doesn't track this price, right? So this one goes, for instance, in '94 or something like that, goes from 1 to 3.5, but the gap between the price here and the price here is not the same, right? So somehow the traders, the whole industry is making a larger margin when the price is high and when the price is low. But the trading cost is the same, right? The transportation cost is the same, the milling cost is the same, the drying cost is the same. So some weird reason, the producer price goes up, but it doesn't go up proportionally with it doesn't go up by much. Okay, so that's the idea. And then if we look at the same thing over our study period, which is a year, so you get the international coffee price there, then you get the exporter purchase price here. So it kind of goes up, but it follows the international price quite a bit. And the same thing for trader price here, which kind of tracks the exporter price. And this is the sale price reported by farmers. You can see here that the margin is smaller than here. So basically, it looks like they don't seem to know the price has gone up. They're selling to these people on the moped, haven't realized that actually they should be selling for more. Okay? Turns out that after this period, the price goes down again. So they were fooled for a short period of time, but actually the pricing goes down again. So that's what motivated us to try to understand whether we could improve things for farmers by giving them price information. Right? It looks like they're being cheated here. And this, by the way, did occur in spite of massive competition among traders. These little moped guys, there's lots of them, and they do compete a lot. So it wasn't like, so this increase in the total margin, the gap between the producer price and the wholesale price, this increase happens in spite of competition. So competition is not taking that excessive margin away. So that when in the paper, we try to make sense of that, and we argue that one likely explanation is that there is excess entry. So you have a lot of moped guys who enter and start buying. Now, of course, the more of them enter, there's still the same amount of coffee available, right? So they have to drive around quite a bit longer to buy the same amount of coffee. They have to cover their costs. And so since they have to cover their costs, then you get a situation where, having entered, they fool the farmers by paying them a price which is low, but then they cover their costs. And so then you get some kind of excess entry that's driven by this lack of catching up on the part of farmers. 85% of them sell at the farm gate in this particular area. 85%. So it's quite possible they don't realize the price has changed. But this can only happen if farmers are ignorant of the movement in the wholesale price. Therefore, why don't we give them information? So that's why we decided to do. We were happy when this opportunity to do a field experiment came up. It was not in Uganda. It was in Maharashtra. It's a collaboration with Thomson Reuters and the World Bank. And the opportunity arose because the World Bank was interested in price information, was running different initiatives about that. And then they came across a commercially available service, price information service, that was developed by Thomson Reuters and commercialized in Maharashtra and other parts of India under the name of Reuters Market Lite. And it's a service that is phone-based, it's in local language, and people who sign up for this service, which they could do by approaching one of the marketing agents on a regional market, they would receive information about wholesale prices in 3 markets and 3 crops of their choices. Okay, so that's how this. That's why it's called light, because you only have 3 times 3. If you want the 50, times 50, then it's the heavy version of this. But typically, you would only do that if you're a trader or something like that. And so what we did was to organize with RML, with Reuters, a protocol by which they agreed not to pursue some villages for a short period. So basically, because they cannot roll out their service to everybody at the same time. India is a very big place. So they kind of said, okay, fine, let's work out some villages where, like 50 villages out of thousands of villages, where you will refrain from marketing actively in those villages for the duration, for the 1 year of our randomized control trial. And so what we did is to pay together with the bank, and actually RML also did contribute financially to this research. So we offered to randomly selected farmers this product, this commercially available product, for free. Okay, that's the idea. It's a reasonably large-scale RCT. We've got 5 districts of Maharashtra, 100 villages, and 1,000 farmers. And we've got 2 surveys, a baseline and an end line, a year apart. And this particular case, we thought, well, there's no coffee there, so couldn't take coffee. There were crops that were storable. We just, heard about storage. Crops that are storable is good for the farmers because they can store it and they can arbitrage intertemporally. And of course, this intertemporal arbitrage will smooth some of the price, lack of price information. So if somebody shows up at their doorstep and says, okay, I'd like to buy your coffee for peanuts, they will say, well, I will just hold on to it. Well, maybe somebody else will show up later who will offer me a better price. So capacity to store basically makes you less vulnerable to the kind of abuse we discussed earlier. So that's why we said, well, why don't we focus on crops that are not storable? Things like mangoes, tomatoes, potatoes in India are not really storable because they have to be put in fridges, which of course, your local farmers don't have. So we focused on these kinds of crops. And then we also, I think we had soya in there, which is a major commercial crop there, which is more storable. So that's the idea. So we basically picked, and we also have pomegranate, which is a fruit, which is probably the least storable of the whole thing. That's what we did. So we were hoping that providing them price information, especially for crops that are not storable, would help them identify a better place where to sell their crop, and therefore would result in them obtaining higher prices. Is this what we find? Actually, no. And perhaps with hindsight, it's one of these things. With hindsight, everything is straightforward. But it turns out that this is something we discovered. We didn't know beforehand, but we discovered that in these 5 districts, so we picked these 5 districts. So we picked, say, tomato in one district and pomegranate in other districts, because you have to pick districts where these crops are really big, very, very important. And what we find is that in each of these districts, which are, it's India, so it's probably millions of people, 5 million, let's say, people living in a district, there's only one big wholesale market which actually trades this particular crop. There might be more wholesale markets for very common crops, but these urban these are crops that basically go to urban areas. These crops are not traded everywhere. So basically, in each district, there was only one district market that was trading these crops in the wholesale, and no farmers that we found basically was selling in another district because it's too far. It's not so much that the physical distance is not so far, but it's very, you'd have to put it on a truck. They would have to go to another district, and this is very complicated for farmers to organize because the trucks they would find locally will all go to the local district, to the local district market. So we found from this RCT that farmers were happy with RML, but there's no effect of RML on producer prices. So basically, they don't get higher prices. There's only one exception, which is for basically, there's 5 crops, so it's basically 20% of each of the sample that goes to each crop. Out of these 20%, 10% are control, 10% are treatment. And we found that among the pomegranate farmers, so the 10% who were treated, half of them were selling originally a pomegranate at the farm gate, a little bit like our Ugandan farmers. They were selling at the farm gate, and we treated them, and they discovered that, hey, wait a minute, the prices for pomegranate is actually better at the wholesale market. So they started selling much more often at the wholesale market. Now, because this is only 5% of the whole thing, that's not, we don't get a lot of power. With hindsight, we should have done only pomegranate farmers. But that's what we find. So now, having done all that, I started digging and looking for other groups that had done similar things. And actually, Dilip Mukerjee and another group, and some collaborators, had done something on potatoes in West Bengal. And you won't find the paper documenting the fact that they don't find any effect on the average producer price, because they say, well, we'll never be able to publish that. But the fact is that they didn't find any effect on the producer price. So there's a main exception, which is there's a study by Jensen of Kerala fishermen. Now, what's peculiar about this Kerala fishermen story is that the fishermen are out at sea, and now when they introduce telephones, they could basically figure out that if they land there, they've caught some, I don't know, tuna. I don't know what they fish in Kerala, but they say they find some tuna. They land the tuna in this particular town. The price today is 20 rupees. If in another town, it's 10 rupees. So they basically, being at sea, decide where to go to land the fish. But of course, this is a completely different situation. They have a comparative advantage in selecting where to sell the fish. My farmers in my Maharashtra district don't. So that tells you when a price information will have an effect on farmers. Final, I'm out of time, but there's another paper with Jenny Aker on prices in Niger. We look at producer prices. We have national data there. It's not an RCT we use. We use quasi-natural experiment, basically introduction, the rollout, the progressive rollout of phone antennas, telephone antennas. And what we find there is that, again, there's no effect on the average producer price of the rollout of this information technology. What we do find, however, is a reduction in the price, the spatial price dispersion, and again, only for cowpeas, which is much less storable than the other two crops we looked at, which is sorghum and millet, which are storable. For sorghum and millet, we don't find any effect because they are storable. So if a farmer shows up at the market and the price is very low, he just goes home with his millet. But if it's cowpea, can't store, so they basically sell. And so you would get spatial price fluctuation, which we believe were driven by traders showing up with their cash in their pocket at the wrong market. But with phones, the traders can figure out where to go. And actually, Jenny has another paper that shows that actually the traders that got a phone early made a slightly larger margin and probably from this spatial arbitrage. So that's all I had time for. That's it. That's the